Welcome in, everybody. YouTube live show back in action here on a Monday because we were all thoroughly enjoying the Super Bowl. Were we not? Look, I come to you very contrite, wearing Eagles colors today in honor of what they did to my Kansas City Chiefs yesterday in the Super Bowl. That was brutal. So I'm going to try and put that behind me. If you will oblige me in that and allow me to turn the page today. Sure, nobody will talk any trash or anything at all, but we have a lot. I am going to try and make this one an interesting one for you today. You can see by the title, we have Congress intersecting with college athletics, and I think it could have a big effect on the future of the Big 12. New Ross Dellinger article out. That is really like, the NBA. Well, I guess it used to be a Woj bomb. Now maybe a Shams bomb. Do people do that? Do the kids say that? The college football equivalent of that these days is any piece dropped by Ross Dellinger. So it's like a Ross bomb, a Dell bomb, whatever you want to call it. Ross Dellinger had another big story, and the NCAA is basically on its way out. Everybody else is just bypassing the NCAA and creating literally a different enforcement arm, and that has a lot of consequences. I think many of them can be good. I think this can get us to a future of college athletics that is much better than the one that is currently here. But how things go with some politicians that are being lobbied right now by folks in the college athletic space could largely tell the tale of how competitive the Big 12 and ACC, for that matter, will actually be allowed to be in this next wave of college athletics. And the next wave really I look at as the next 5 years. I think that's really the way to start viewing this. Because right around 2030, we're going to hit another wave of something. It's going to be another wave of something, whether it's a super league, whether it's more conference realignment, things will change again there. So you're gearing up for the next 5 years. I really do like Big 12 hoops. When it's just Big 12 hoops, doesn't always perform that well here on the channel. But there's a way to work this into the bigger picture that I think is a situation worth monitoring with Big 12 hoops and how one Big 12 school could possibly be costing the Big 12 quite a bit of money. And I'm going to go back to ranking the Big 12 coaches. This is backed by popular demand. Someone had mentioned to me, you need to update those lists that you did last year. I did Big 12 home environments in football. I also did Big 12 coaches. It's a tier list, people, from the S tier all the way down to the D tier. I'm going to rank Big 12 coaches. And we've got an SEC coach using the same tired jargon that has emanated from the SEC for, basically since the playoffs started specifically. We're still getting some of that trickling out. Took a shot at the Big 12 and the ACC, so we'll talk about that tonight as well. Get in here. Appreciate all of you coming in from Twitter. YouTubers, you can fill up the comment section, the chat. Please do so throughout the night. If you want to guarantee that you make it on the show, you can submit a super chat by clicking the $ below the chat box. That is how you can submit a super chat. Make sure that you get on the show tonight. Subscribe to the channel. Click the bell so you know when it is that I'm going live. All of that stuff does really help. If you are just somebody meandering over on Twitter, if you could just go to John Kurtz on YouTube, click that like button. I would much appreciate that. And make sure to subscribe to my Big 12 newsletter as well. It's open for business, ofbnews.com. And one announcement that I did not make last time and I need to continue to make. I've got merch, people. I've got merch, and you can find the link in the description of this video right now. Very easy. Should be the first or second link that is right there for you, but it'll take you there. My friends at My Swaggy Merch have hooked that up. So if you need to get some John Kurtz merch or some Open for Business merch and further support the channel, that would be great. I would appreciate it. You can do so very, very easily there. And I appreciate all of their help with that. Okay. Oh, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo as well. If you are someone who's not able to catch the show live, especially tonight, I know different night of the week that I'm doing it because of the Super Bowl. If you're not able to catch it live, just go to John-Kurtz-4 and you can leave a question or comment with your donation there. And I will kick off the next show with it. So you can still be a part of all of the convo. Let's get going. I know these stories can be a little bit harder to digest sometimes. I'm going to try and make this one pretty digestible for you. It is very significant and not getting a ton of run. I think part of it is just everybody's kind of in college basketball mode / the Super Bowl NFL, just a little bit checked out on college football and bigger picture college athletic stuff. Timing may hurt here, but it's a massive Ross Dellinger story. And what this really means, I would tell you, is the Big 12 and the ACC could be getting kind of a gift in the form of a new enforcement entity that is replacing the NCAA. But a lot of the fate rests in the hands of Congress, which I know is not what many people want to hear right now. Politicians are not exactly who everybody wants to be dealing with, and they may really control what a lot of this is going to wind up looking like. We may also be headed toward a world where players actually stick around at a school for multiple years, which I think would be welcome news to many, many people. So here, let me start reading to you from Ross's article. During a 2-day summit in the nation's capital, a transition team charged with organizing concepts of the House settlement inched closer to establishing a new structure to oversee, manage, and enforce the settlement for all of D1. So the House settlement, okay? Let me just try and translate for you here. House settlement, big NIL lawsuit, back pay issued to former student athletes, setting the precedent for revenue sharing moving forward. Early April, we'll get an answer one way or the other on whether it's being accepted where it's at right now. Nobody totally knows what's going to happen there. But certainly the hope for most involved here is that will be accepted. There have obviously been challenges over Title IX. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But during a 2-day summit in the nation's capital, a transition team who's organizing the concepts of the House settlement inch closer to establishing a new structure to oversee, manage, and enforce the athlete compensation for all of D1. A new enforcement agency. Right now, your enforcement agency would be the NCAA, right? That's been the enforcement agency forever. And the NCAA may not be totally going away, but the NCAA is certainly losing a lot of its it's already lost most of the teeth that it has. It does not have much going for it anymore. It's going to become even less powerful here if they truly do establish, if Ross is writing it, it's happening. If they truly do establish a new enforcement arm to oversee how the athletes are getting paid, and then whether or not schools or athletes are violating fair market value with extra NIL beyond revenue sharing. That's more or less what you have here. It's an LLC that will be overseen by a CEO or executive director, and it is an enforcement arm to police violators of the new salary cap, and is expected to feature revenue sharing policies and a corresponding penalty structure for violators. This new nameless entity running adjacent and intertwined with the NCAA, that's the language there. So the NCAA will still exist. It just doesn't have really any kind of enforcement over NIL, revenue sharing, all of that. It will be a sea change in how college athletics is policed, replacing the much maligned NCAA process. One thing that is talked about a lot here is that they want to make sure that any type of ruling on things moves a lot faster than things do in the NCAA, which that is a welcome change I would think just about anybody can get behind. Think back to the Kansas case taking literal years for anybody to decide anything. These things do not happen quickly with the NCAA. That seems to be a point to get away from that. But the article does make a point to say the NCAA's enforcement unit for now will continue to police matters around eligibility and academics. So I guess they can keep the books, they can keep the eligibility, the money that is now entering the sport in the form of revenue sharing, legal, paying for players. That's going to be policed by something else. No name yet for the entity. Might be a good time now to ask in the comments section. Leave some names. What names would you guys want to see for this enforcement agency? So there is a committee here that is doing all of this, and the Big 12 is involved, actually. You have representatives from Arizona and Cincinnati, along with reps from Washington, Georgia Tech, and Kentucky. And then Ross Bjork from Ohio State, Graham Neff from Clemson, Trev Alberts from Texas A&M. Those three were named by name as opposed to just schools being represented there. Transition team gathered in Washington on Sunday and Monday, so today, as I record this here live, to further explore details around the newly created framework. There's going to be, here's what they're going to do. It's a three-pronged approach here. A cap management system. So revenue sharing cap, basically, again, the professionalization of college sports. The cap is going to have to be managed, just like you would talk about in the NBA, NFL, et cetera. Then there will be an NIL clearinghouse, and that's already been discussed and talked about because there is controversy about that. That will be looking at NIL deals that come in outside of the revenue sharing money that's being paid from the school, and this is where the controversy surrounds, can you actually force this to be a deal that is fair market value, quote unquote fair market value, which would mean you can't do what is happening now, which is just pay for play under the guise of NIL. The NCAA lost all power to enforce any of that. So right now you're just calling it NIL, but it's not actually a deal or an exchange of the athlete generally doing anything for the company. In most cases, we're just giving you a bunch of money. And certainly it's not fair market value. Maybe you show up and sign a few autographs. We pay you $600,000. It's not exactly fair market value. So for right now, that would be limited. And that would be a great thing if it is limited for the competitiveness of the Big 12 and the ACC. Therein lies the crux of the issue that I mentioned in the title of the video. There will also, number 3, be an investigative and infractions unit. So you'll have literally somebody who can go and investigate cases of, and a part of this is going to be tampering. It's not just going to be schools paying somebody too much or whatever. Tampering can also be involved here. That's something that has been mentioned. So look, lots of coaches complaining about that these days, fans complaining about these days. I am sure that a lot of people will be happy about that if we're going to get some actual tampering enforcement here. But again, keep in mind here, right? Like we've heard that a lot of Big 12 schools are going to be able to hit at least close to that $20.5 million for the rev share cap. If there truly is an enforcement agency that is going to stop any kind of crazy payments outside of that to the student athletes and make sure it's fair market value if you're getting NIL deals, that can be a real boost to the Big 12 and the ACC's ability to compete. It will lessen the ability of bigger schools like Ohio State, like Texas A&M that we just saw were represented on this committee. It would lessen their ability to just money whip into getting other players, right? They can still do it. If you're in a bigger city, this would, I would think, tilt the scales toward schools that might be in a bigger city, like, Austin, Texas. You probably have more opportunities to get NIL deals, fair market value NIL deals, and that could help sweeten the pot a bit. But I do think it would dramatically decrease the inherent advantages that would be there with some of the bigger brands. Dellinger notes in the story, athletes whose outside NIL deals are found to be not at fair market value will be ruled ineligible if they execute those deals. So it sounds like this enforcement agency would not be messing around. They're talking about ruling you ineligible. If you go take a deal for $200,000 from a car dealership and you show up for one appearance and they deem that that's not fair market value, bam, you're ineligible, sitting out the big game. That is a lot. As part of the settlement terms, there is a separate court overseen arbitration system that serves as an appeals process. Okay, so you can appeal. If you think that NIL deal was actually fair market value and they rule that it's not, there is supposedly a third-party court overseen arbitration system that would be involved here as well. But here's one of the keys. All right. The second you start to think, all right, man, like that sounds great. We don't know how a lot of this is going to break down in a lot of different ways. And a big piece of it is going to be controlled by Congress and what happens with politicians, which, I'm sure for a lot of people are not super thrilled about it. Another group here is the statement from Ross Dellinger. He says another group at odds with at least one portion of the settlement is the Collective Association, a group of more than 40 school-affiliated booster collective directors who have been publicly critical of the settlement's NIL clearinghouse. As you can imagine, places that are just doling out NIL right now as freely and openly as they want do not like the idea of being limited in any way by what they could give student athletes in the future. So they're saying, look, revenue sharing We can't give all $20.5 million to the football program. We're going to have to give some other places. We want to be able to just, if we want to throw another $10 million out there because our donors want to fund that, we want to be able to do that without any limit. Not a surprising stance for those NIL collectives to have. And the initial plan here is at least trying to curb all of that a little bit, right? So this is where I think, especially if you're a Big 12 or an ACC fan, you're going to have to hone in and watch how all of this goes. Members of the association spent a couple of days in Washington this week holding their annual meetings and visiting with federal lawmakers. That is the collective association. So the collective association, these NIL collective associations are actually lobbying now lawmakers, people in Congress, to try and get the ruling that they want. Now, if you ask me my opinion on this, I'm all for athletes getting as much money as they possibly can. In an ideal world, I suppose that's how it would work. But also in an ideal world, like professional sports, we do have like literal salary caps and things that are collectively bargained. That's frankly the route that I wish all of this would go. Just collectively do it like professional sports. You're already 90% of the way there. Just do it like that. Here, this is a little more of like a weird gray area where, okay, I want them to be able to make all that they can. But even in pro sports, like you collectively bargain a salary cap in a way to make it reasonably fair for everybody. So you get caught in a gray area here where if it's, okay, there's revenue sharing, there is a cap there, but outside of that, you can still just freely throw out as much money as you can because we're not going to worry about fair market value. I'm not crazy about that, even though I can understand why someone would take it to court and be like, well, we're going to sue you for this because you are limiting in some ways what an athlete could make. And a part of what people are lobbying Congress for right now, too, is just protection from being sued in the future. They just want all this codified and to get some like antitrust protections so that they're not going to continuously be fighting off lawsuits, which is exactly what's happening right now. If you've been paying attention, like eligibility, the NCAA has very little ability to like enforce eligibility anymore because everybody is suing for everything, whether it's Diego Pavia and saying my junior college year shouldn't count, or there's a kid now that's done Division II. My Division II years should not count. I mean, the NCAA is just getting killed left and right with lawsuits about everything. So they're really hoping that they get some help in that regard. Further into the article, at least 2 NCAA representatives were a part of the meeting this week, along with officials from LBI and Deloitte. LBI is a software company that maintains the NBA's player contract management system. So they're going to manage the cap. There you go, taken straight from the NBA. They're going to manage the cap in college athletics. And then Deloitte, the world's largest professional services network, they're the NIL clearinghouse. And that's a name that had already been reported and already out there. They will be the ones determining fair market value for the income made by these athletes in NIL deals. So they will have the ability to shut things down and or deem that something should make a player ineligible. Multiple penalties are under discussion for those found to be circumventing or exceeding the new cap or tampering, including school fines, revenue share pool reductions, and or coach and administrator suspensions. So you're talking about ineligibility for athletes, suspensions for coaches, suspensions for admins, reducing the amount of revenue sharing money you can dole out to student athletes. These are pretty serious punishments that are being talked about here. You can imagine how that's not going over well in some circles, particularly probably those with the most power these days in college athletics. Here's one last little bit from Dellinger on the lobbying aspect of this. At the same time, college leaders lobbied on the Hill in a continued effort to encourage lawmakers to pass legislation that codifies the House settlement and protects the NCAA and power leagues from enforcing the very same policies that the transition team is exploring. So this whole thing that we just talked about, transition team, looking at all these different policies and stuff, in some ways they don't want that to happen because they don't want to have to worry about those things. Long story short, well, we are waiting for that day in early April to find out what's going to happen with the House settlement. There's still a lot that has to be sorted out. You know, Title IX has become a piece of this. All the lobbying going on and trying to get congressional help on this is a piece of this. What will come of that? So it's big in that we now know that like the plan right now is to be working without the NCAA, and the NCAA will have no real power over all of this stuff, and it continues to just wither away into basically nothing. But we also get a story like this, and it's like, all right, there are so many wrinkles and levels to this still to come. We don't know exactly how all this is going to sort itself out. But like I said, the part that as a fan of a non-Power 2 school, I have my eye on the most at this moment is what's going to happen with that clearinghouse and the fair market value that keeps being mentioned here. One thing that I think could be good, I heard Josh Pate talking about all this, and I figured you guys would really like this. But one thing that could come of this is that schools would structure the revenue sharing money at least toward players who stay for multiple years at a school can make more money that way. Think of it sort of like, in the NBA, there's all this talk about Luka Doncic getting traded to the Lakers. He's missing out on $100 million that he could have gotten more from the Mavericks, and only the Mavericks, because of the Supermax contract with a player who's been drafted somewhere. You can pay them more. I mean, in essence, you could pay a player more if they're a senior that's been around at your school for a couple of years than a transfer senior, right? So it would create some incentive to stay. So these types of things could be the end result of this. I think this could wind up being a very good thing, the way all this is going for college athletics, certainly a more structured thing. But time will tell on exactly how that is going to look. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Please like the video. And all your comments. Welcome in the chat. What's up, College Football Addiction? Good to see you, my man. Appreciate that. And everybody else, Tim, Immaculate, John, everybody that's here, thank you for being here. Appreciate all of you guys. Super chats, welcome. Click the $ below the chat box to do that if you want to make sure your question or comment gets on tonight. But if you can just like the video, subscribe to the channel, that is very, very helpful as well. Click the link in the description or go to ofbnews.com to subscribe to the Big 12 newsletter, open for business. And you can check out my merch, thanks to my friends at My Swaggy Merch, by clicking the link in the description of the video as well. So there is a lot going on there. I have talked recently a couple of times about how important basketball is to the Big 12, right? And mostly in terms of a money standpoint, like how much the Big 12 could theoretically catch up a little bit to the big boys by closing the gap through decoupling and selling their basketball rights separately from the football TV rights. But could that plan come crumbling down a little bit because of one Big 12 program? That's a question I'm raising today. And this is where I will be able to tie in what's going on in the Big 12 in basketball right now, as we are really in the thick of it here in February. But look, Big 12 basketball has been very overshadowed by the SEC this year, and it sucks, and I think we all hate it, but it is what it is, man. You go look at bracketology, right? Not that that's the be-all, end-all, but it's a pretty good indicator. 4 of the top 5 seeds, like teams in the field, not 5 seeds, like seeds 1 through 5. Like literally the 4 1 seeds and then a 2 seed, 4 of the top 5 are from the SEC right now. And 6 of the top 8 are from the SEC right now, meaning they have 6 number 1 or number 2 seeds, which is crazy. And this is a point of humility for the Big 12 and a point of pride right now for the SEC. Like, you've got to be humble if you're a Big 12 fan and be like, hey, they have kind of earned it this year. They have. Hat tip. The SEC has earned it this year in basketball. And the Big 12, I think, is rebounding a bit. Okay. I think we're seeing like there are absolutely Big 12 teams capable of making a deep run, and the tournament is how we will generally remember this. It creates a disproportionate chunk of the memory of the season is what happens actually in the NCAA tournament. Right or wrong, that is what it is. So there is still plenty of time to turn some of this narrative around. But SEC is the number 1 conference in the country, according to Ken Palm. The Big 12 is also barely behind the Big 10. So that is stuck in there as well. Big 12 has more teams feeling like it's dragging things down, not as tight and compact with deep teams as it has felt in the past. And some of that is just you added more volume. Necessary evil there. But, Colorado, Arizona State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Utah, Cincy, schools that are struggling a bit right now. K-State, I don't really know how to classify them. They're 12-11, but they've won 5 straight and are as hot as anybody in the country. If they do cool back off, you can throw them right back into that group as well. That's kind of hurting the league. Now, as I said, I mean, the Big 12 is rebounding a bit. Big 12 is rebounding a bit. They still do. If you're a Ken Pom guy, all right. If we're going to use the analytics, force feed those down your throat. Shout out to Bart Torvik and Ken Pomeroy. 5 of the top 11 in Ken Pom are from the Big 12, but one of those is Kansas. And that's the crux of the issue that I want to talk about here. So Kansas is at number 11. If you've watched Kansas lately, they do not look like a team that is capable of a deep tournament run. They do not. Texas Tech, Arizona, Houston definitely do lately. I'll still give Iowa State benefit of the doubt and say I think that they do too. They have hit a bit of a rough patch here. Better on Saturday for sure with College game day in the house. And I think especially now that they're back at full strength, they're going to be fine. So you've got 4 teams that definitely look capable of a deep tourney run. You also, I mean, look, if K-State keeps it up playing as well as they are, you could add another team to the mix that actually makes it into the tournament. Can you get 9 or 10 teams into the tournament? Probably more like 8. But if K-State keeps winning, maybe you could stretch that out toward 9 or 10, which would also help. But Kansas, man, we've got a real elephant in the room situation now with the Jayhawks. Bill Self, insane stat. Okay, so Kansas loses in Manhattan on Saturday, and they lose for the 3rd time in 3 years in Manhattan, which had not happened since the 80s. And with that loss, Bill Self is now 17-14 in his last 2 seasons in the Big 12. 17-14. The 20-plus years before that, he had won 80% of his conference games. He's 17-14 the last 2 seasons. Now, you can say, John, small sample size, and hey, that's cool typically. But I think this is worth mentioning because we all know what has drastically changed in the last, and if you're going to extend it to another year beyond that, it's 3 straight years now we're going on that Kansas has not been to a second weekend in the NCAA tournament. Now, right before that was a national championship for sure. And that was right at the beginning of this NIL portal stuff, but it was very different, vastly different at that point than it is now and has been the last couple of years. So as we've had this crazy sea change in the way college athletics works, Bill Self has slumped. Kansas has slipped. They're not, and look, this is all relative discussion. This is not K-State guy popping on to say Kansas sucks, KU sucks. It's not that. Like I said, they're still 11th in Ken Pom. I mean, they're still a top 20 team. If you are watching them, they certainly don't look like a team capable of making a deep run, but they're still a good team. What we are talking about here, how I would make the comp, is that it feels very much like Kansas is going through like a Clemson football thing right now, where Clemson football spent not as long as Kansas, but the better part of like a decade being at the elite level of the sport. They were an elite school that was in the mix for a national championship every single year. Now they have fallen to merely a good to very good program. And that's kind of what it feels like for Kansas here the last couple of years. Good to very good, but not this elite level. They have slipped off of that in this portal era. And I think that's evidenced by, Bill Self has lost one of his biggest assets, which was that he was a guy that would develop and create tough, gritty teams with veteran players that have been in that program for a really long time. He's a guy that, back to the first story that I talked about tonight, probably would love to welcome in like, hey, let's give me some incentive to keep guys around here longer and not lose as many to the portal. That could be something that definitely helps him. But I think it's neutralized one of the biggest things that he has. And now he's got a team full of highly touted transfers. I mean, like AJ Storr was a top 5 transfer in the portal last year. He's gone from 17 points a game to 6 points a game. He's below 30% 3-point shooter. He's 39% from the floor. It's not good. Like, it's not going well. They have not integrated very well. Rylan Griffin's been a little bit disappointing too. That was another big one that they got out of the portal. I mean, even if you ask Kansas fans, Hunter Dickinson puts up numbers, but I'm not sure that they feel great about what that has turned into in terms of like the big building block that you have built this team around. And look, you have hired guns. You have players that don't seem to be, it's the same thing I saw at K-State on a different scale, but same thing I saw at K-State for much of the year. Like guys that just look like they maybe don't care or play quite as hard. They just don't have the toughness and intensity that you'd expect from a Bill Self team. And you're going to get more of that in this portal era. It's a little bit tougher, man. It's the reason why, like, they've lost 2 games at Allen Fieldhouse this year in Big 12 play. That never happens. They've lost 3 of their last 7 in Big 12 play at home, which is crazy. I mean, that's crazy to me. That was an impossible place to win. You just mark that down as an L for basically everybody for the last 20 years. So there are some real issues going on here. And this does impact the Big 12. If Kansas is not going to be an elite Big 12 program, this is the question that I'm really raising here. I'm not burying Kansas yet. More on that in a moment. Certainly not. But if this continues and they fall to Clemson levels, I'm not again saying the bottom falls out of Kansas. I think too much infrastructure, too many people that really care. Great athletic director going right now. It's a lot that is working in favor of Kansas there. I don't think the bottom falls out. But if they go to becoming a Clemson instead of an Alabama or an Ohio State, maybe Ohio State would be the more apropos. We'll see about Kalen DeBoer. If they go from being an Ohio State to a Clemson, 2025 Clemson, what does that do to the Big 12 and the TV product and what you're trying to do in marketing this basketball league when you're already mired in a year where the SEC is the dominant force here in the league or in the country? That's the question that I would raise. How has it impacted the ACC that Clemson is not where they once were? I mean, it doesn't mean that the ACC is totally out of the national championship picture every single year. Florida State proved in 2023 that they're capable of putting together an undefeated regular season. They just got screwed out of the playoff. But they're also showing that they can be erratic with what happened this year with Mike Norvell. Again, welcome to the portal era. Things are going to be more erratic. Miami always seems to be underwhelming, perpetually underwhelming. I mean, I just won't pick Miami to make any kind of nationally significant noise until I actually see it. It hasn't happened in 2 decades. And this past year, I mean, I would tell you, like, what actually happened there with the ACC bombing out of the playoff with 2 double-digit losses, the Big 12 coming close, very within 1 play, Arizona State of getting to the semifinal. In that game against Texas and BYU smashing Colorado, proving that they should have been in the at-large convo. I mean, I think the ACC was the 4th best football conference this year. That's like Clemson being at an elite national championship level dramatically changes that. It hurts the Big 12's perception as the elite basketball conference when Kansas is not elite. And I think like it'll take a lot of time for that perception to really switch. I mean, Houston is playing at like Bill Self Kansas level over the last like 5-6 years. They've got that taken care of, but Self did it for 20, So like it's going to take a long time to build up that sort of credibility. And in the meantime, if Kansas is going to continue scuffling a little bit relative to where they're at, it will hurt. It will hurt. Texas Tech, Arizona, Iowa State, great. Not on that level. Arizona closest out of the 3, obviously, with just the brand equity that they have. But they have not been at a Kansas level. Baylor won a national championship, but it also feels like, Scott Drew is going through sort of a similar kind of thing to Bill Self, where they're still very good, but not at like elite national championship caliber right now. So it's awesome to have a bunch of those teams. But I just mentioned, I mean, the SEC has 4 1 or 2 seeds right now, according to bracketology. It's not that. And so if you're trying to split your basketball and football media rights and sell that to make up ground on a league like the SEC, if it keeps going this way and you're going to lose a little bit of juice with Kansas and the SEC is going to gain all this juice and have the best basketball conference, well, you're not going to make up any ground. You may be able to decouple and get more money for your schools, which you absolutely should still do and would have to do. But the SEC could just take your idea and do it better. I mean, their TV deal is going to be coming up at the same time. They can just take your idea and do it better. There will no shame in that at all. I mean, the Big 12 already had planted its flag in the flirting with private equity space, and Tony Petitti and the Big Ten thumbed their nose at it publicly, and now all of a sudden, 6 months later, here they are doing the same thing, flirting with private equity, probably going to do it. They'll take your idea. It's the same fear everybody had with private equity. Take your idea, do it themselves, and be able to keep the gap just as big as it was before. You won't gain any ground. So that, I think, is the fear here, that it's this combination. I mean, obviously, a lot of this is the SEC has just put together a really good basketball league. They seem to have it figured out right now. But Kansas, the flag bearer of the Big 12, which is Kansas, the real brand identity of Big 12 basketball, has taken a step back a bit. And we'll see. We'll see if it continues to go that way, where they become Clemson instead of Ohio State. I'm not going to count KU and Bill Self out. Dude is, I mean, I for my money, Bill Self 3 years ago was the best coach in college basketball, the best guy doing it in that previous era. So he's unbelievable. And Kansas has a lot of people that care. They've got plenty of resources. They've got everything it takes to figure it out. And hell, this year, I mean, they will probably still be a top 5 seed in the tourney, which means absolutely they could go on a big run. Absolutely, Kansas could go on a run in the tournament that would make all of this seem a little bit silly. It again is the blessing and the curse, the beauty in some ways of the tournament. It can change on a dime, totally change the tenor of your season. Just ask NC State last year. So we'll see. But we're going on like 2.5 years now where it looks like there has been a real drop-off. And Bill Self last year was hell-bent and determined, and all the narrative out of Kansas was like, we're going to be so deep. We're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. We're going to get all this talent. And they hit on guys in the portal, and it just is not working. It just is not working. So we've had this slide tied to a major change in the way the sport works. I think it's fair to raise that question, man. Like, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen here? For the Big 12's sake, even if you are a Kansas hater, for the Big 12's sake, it would be better if they can figure it out. All right, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not. Appreciate everybody who is here. You can subscribe to my Big 12 newsletter, Open for Business, at ofbnews.com. Click the link in the description of the video in order to get signed up for that. Appreciate all of you who do read, all 3,400 plus of you. And check out my merch. Got a link in the description for merch. My Swaggy merch can hook you up with some good John Kurtz and OFB Open for Business merch there. Michael says, I sure hope BYU keeps gelling like K-State has. Well, we'll see both of those teams up against each other here before too long. That's a game, quite frankly, I'm not looking forward to on Saturday when K-State goes to Provo, just because I think that's as tough a place to play as almost anywhere in the Big 12 right now, outside of Allen or Hilton. And I just outlined to you how Allen is maybe stepped down half a notch in terms of how difficult it is to play, like right at this very moment. Man, going to Provo, not easy. Not easy. So I'm almost like mentally, I guess I shouldn't say that. Mentally, I've chalked that up to like, I almost think it'll be a tougher game than playing Arizona tomorrow at home. So we'll see. But yes, cheers to both of our teams continuing to do that. Michael, my friend, thank you for being here. Great to see you and really appreciate you. So I'm going to do something a little bit different and kind of fun here coming up. Okay. For those of you that have watched the channel for a while, I'm sure you saw back in the spring, in the off season last year, I did a couple of tier lists. So I ranked Big 12 football stadium environments, and I ranked Big 12 football coaches based on a tier system. And back by popular demand, I'm bringing it back, and I'm going to debut it here in a live format. So I will rank the coaches, as you will see here, from the S tier to the D tier. S tier to the D tier is what you are going to get. Very easy, simply. I will drag the coach wherever it is that they're going. You'll see, I will explain it all. So if you're wondering where your coach is going to be, now is the time to find out. It was really fun to go through this list and see, all right, how much have things changed since last year? So let's get started. Our Big 12 coaches tier lists. First on the board for me is Dave Aranda. Dave Aranda. Last year, he was on the C tier. He has an 8-win regular season, and he slides back up to the B tier. How about that? Dave Aranda, a mover already. It was tough last year for me to pick where to put him, and I put him in C. It was like the great year, 12 wins, but then outside of that, had really struggled. Things were going definitely in one direction, and it was not up. Now you look at it, and it's like, okay, there are like two different halves here to the story. He's 11-23 in one portion of his Baylor career. He's 20-7 in another, and if not for a crazy Hail Mary, would be 21-6 and would have been right in the thick of the Big 12 title race to try and get there for a second time. So I kind of just split the difference and said, not just winning the 8 games last year, but the fact that they were hot at the end of the year and that they haven't so much coming back, a great quarterback coming back. They figured out the most important thing in football. I'm feeling good enough to move Aranda back to the B tier for right now. So congratulations to Dave Aranda. Oh, Brent Brennan is next up, man. And I'm sorry. There's no, I want to save you the suspense. There's no other option for Brent Brennan right now but to put him in the D tier. This all, by the way, the S tier is the best, obviously. D tier is the worst. All relative to their peers in the Big 12. So I'm not necessarily saying D tier nationally, S tier nationally. It's how they compare to the rest of the league. Brent Brennan, man, it was just a disaster of a season. Squandered a top 10 pick at receiver, had a very good returning quarterback, didn't go well there. That was already after the narrative last year was like, well, it's kind of like an ink blot test on what you think of him. Went 34-48 at San Jose State. So you can say, well, that's a terrible record. Why would he be any good? But there had only been 3 bowls in 11 years before him, and he went to 3 in 4 years. So tough place to win, and he had a nice career there. Now you start to lean toward the, well, he was 34-48 side of this. 25 players in the portal this year, taking a big swing, had to. Lot to replace there. Lost, Manu, Maldonado, lots of really good players in addition to obviously Teteroa McMillan. We'll see how things go, but I think only fair to drop him down. We come to a new coach here. Where did he go? He's next on my list here. Okay, you know what? We'll just go Matt Campbell. We'll go Matt Campbell because I'm not able to pull Rich Rod, who is what I was going to do there. Matt Campbell, A tier last year, S tier this year. Matt Campbell gets to move on up. It is well-deserved. He had a phenomenal year. I was looking through my notes from last year and what I said about him, and it was, hey, A tier, I think he's very good, but I wonder about that ceiling. Seems like very high floor. What about the ceiling? He smashed right through the ceiling this year with 11 wins. 11 wins, now 2 years removed from a 4-win season and a gambling scandal, and has them playing for the Big 12 championship, winning a school record 11 games. Obviously, he has displayed now a new ceiling and is a guy that belongs on the S tier. I literally did say last year in this exercise, if he takes the next step, he moves into the S tier, and he absolutely did that. Guy who's won 7+ games in 7 of his 9 seasons at Iowa State, has a Big 12 title and 2 Big 12 title appearances. Well deserved there. Well deserved. All right, now let's go Rich Rod. Next on my list, totally new. Neil Brown was a B tier last year. Neil Brown got fired. He's done. So where are we going with Rich Rod? I'm going B tier. With Rich Rod. I think it's fair. Start him kind of in the middle because this is a very mixed message kind of resume. Great stuff at West Virginia the first time around. Obviously, he had 3 10+ win seasons. Came painstakingly close to playing for a national championship. 6 seasons, he won 8+ games there. West Virginia, in the last 6 years, only has 1 8+ win season. So that shows you what he did relative to, a peer and Neil Brown, who has been there recently. Solid career at Arizona, 8 games over 500, got him to a Fiesta Bowl, won 10 games there. So Arizona fans certainly are familiar with Rich Rod, but Michigan was bad. Rebuilt at Jacksonville State. Like, okay, how well will that translate from that level? You're certainly more inclined to believe that it will translate better because he's done it here at this level before. But it is a much different game, and he's relying on 31 portal kids this year, getting the program jump-started. For right now, I kind of split the difference with Rich Rod. Enough respect for me to keep him in the B tier. Now the biggest star of all from last year, Kenny Dillingham. Kenny Dillingham, I had him in the D tier last year, the D tier. This is wild, people. How far can I possibly move Kenny Dillingham up in just 1 year after winning 3 games? His first year at ASU, all the way to the S. All the way to the S, baby. Kenny Dillingham pulled the impossible. D tier to the S tier. And when you go from winning 3 games to damn near getting to the semifinals of the college football playoff, coming 1 play away from that, and perhaps a targeting penalty that was a bad call away from that, you get to the S tier. And it's about more than just last season, which obviously was phenomenal. 3 wins to 11 wins, an 8-win jump, nothing short of incredible. But, I mean, how he did it, Cam Scadaboo was not some crazy 5-star recruit that took $1 million to get out of the portal. Cam Scadaboo was a guy just hanging out at Sacramento State, and he turned him into a borderline Heisman finalist. He should have gotten an invite to New York. He turned Sam Leavitt into a top 5 quarterback for next year. You're seeing him on all these lists out there that are listing the best quarterbacks for next season. Sam Leavitt, pretty consensus top 5. And that's after he was not afraid to move on from Jaden Rashada, which I would think as a young coach, there'd be a lot of pressure to keep the really highly recruited, high-profile guy, give him the job, try to make that work. Said, look, man, Sam Leavitt's better. I'm going to go roll with that. And if Jaden Rashada transfers, then fine. And if you follow Rashada's career now, about to go somewhere else again, that was obviously the right call. And then we also got the fact here, Dillingham's 34. He seems like the perfect coach for the new portal era. Young, understands NIL, understands the portal. He's been all about hyping up his guys who enter the portal, which is a great look. Man, that's a fantastic look. That's the type of thing that you need to do these days. Even if some old school fans don't like it, you got to do that. So the only drawback to me on Dillingham so far is just short track record. It's 1 year, but I got to go all the way to the S for what he did this year. Got to go all the way to the S. Okay, who do we got next? We got Sonny Dykes. We've got Sonny Dykes. Where am I going with Sonny? I had him in the B tier last year, which was a tough one. I was waffling back and forth between B and C because I was so disenchanted with what had happened since the national championship game appearance. We're going to go B. We're going to keep Sonny Dykes in the B tier. No movement this year. Obviously, a guy who has won a playoff game, which nobody else in the league has done. Got to give him credit for that. That was a hell of a run in 2022 at TCU. And it was a really, really bad year. This year, fairly milquetoast, which for TCU, that's pretty rare. TCU has been the program that swings to either 12 wins or 4 or 5. There's not been much in between. This was an in-between year from Sonny Dykes. 9-4 with a bowl win, 8-4 regular season. Solid enough for me to keep him in the B tier for right now. Sonny Dykes can be mobile. That's a guy that could definitely be mobile. With a good year or a bad year, I would not hesitate to move him up or down 1 tier at all. Here's a fascinating one, guys. Mike Gundy. What do you do with Mike Gundy now? He was in the S tier. What do you do with him after the worst season of his career with only 3 wins and getting shut out in the Big 12? We're going to drop him to the A tier. Now, understand this is much more about being like a snapshot in time than anything else, because obviously based on his career accomplishments, he would be an S tier Big 12 coach. But because we're right in the midst of this now, I've got to say, hey, is it slipping? Is this the end of the line and things are starting to slip for Gundy or not? I've got to ask that question. And because of that, I'm putting him in the A tier. He's an absolute legend, probably a college football Hall of Famer. But I wonder if we're witnessing the beginning of the end tier or if he does have another comeback in him. 18 straight bowl games before last year, 18 straight winning seasons. He's got 8 double-digit win seasons, 2 12-win seasons. Again, can't knock the historical resume at all, but I've got to take some recency into account here and put him there for now. Joey McGuire, my guy. I like Joey McGuire a lot, and this was one of the toughest decisions that I had to make. Are you going B tier or A tier with Joey McGuire right now? We're still rocking the B tier. And a part of the reason that it's tough is because, he just pulled together the number 3 portal class in the country. He recruits like a madman. I know the Micah Hudson saga has been crazy, but he did land him. He was a 5-star recruit. Follows that up with a number 3 portal class this year. I know money's doing a lot of talking there for Texas Tech, but clearly you still got to be able to sell it too. And Joey can definitely do that. And he has been pretty rock solid and just inching the program closer on the field. They got up to an 8-win regular season this year, still looking to break through for that 9th or 10th win and seriously threaten for a Big 12 championship spot. Tech fans, I think, have felt like that was going to happen each of the last 2 years. It has not. So we still got to do that. Before I can move them into the A tier, I've still got to see that happen. Maybe not even necessarily making the Big 12 championship game, but like legit be right there to the very end. And I just haven't seen that yet. So I'm still in prove-it mode with Joey McGuire, much as I love him, and I do love him. Chris Kleiman, somewhat disappointing year this year. What are you doing with Chris Kleiman after a 9-4 year, which was an 8-4 regular season? Started 7-1 and really, really limped to the finish line. I'm going to keep him in the S tier, but if there's a second consecutive kind of like 8-win season, I can understand knocking Kleiman back to the A tier, especially if we look at like what's happening with other coaches in the league. Still think he's done an excellent job. He's been very consistent. The only time he has not won 8 games at K-State was the COVID year. A lot of wonky stuff happening there. And even if last season was slightly disappointing, he still, with a first-year starter at quarterback, kept things pretty well in line with what the expectations of the program have been. Hardcore fans, I understand. I see it in my Discord every day. They very much want him to take that next step again and win another Big 12 championship. Obviously, that would be the hope. But for now, he's got such a high floor and has, I thought, done a really good job in the portal this offseason. It's not going to be the highest ranked portal class in the world that you will see, but I think he's done a very good job. And he also maintained a lot of his talent, kept those guys around. It's a developmental program. I expect them to be better next year. We'll see. Certainly potential downward mobility if it is another similar year. Scott Frost. This is one that I'm sure won't make UCF fans very happy. What do you do with Scott Frost? You put him in the C tier. Look, Scott Frost in 2017 was awesome. And I was all about celebrating UCF's national championship in 2017. Seriously, did it on my radio show. We had a whole thing about it. But, man, it's 2 years. We have 2 years of Scott Frost being a good Power 5-ish, although at the time it wasn't even a Power 5 league. We've got 2 years of Scott Frost being a good head coach at the Power 5-ish level. 19-7 in that 2-year run at UCF. Then he had one of the worst Big Ten, big program coaching stints you'll ever see. 16-31 at Nebraska, 10-6 in the Big Ten. I don't see how you can go any higher than C tier for Scott Frost with that, man. I really don't. I think you got to stick him there. He could rocket right up, and I have not had a very good read on UCF because I had Gus Malzahn in the A tier last year. A tier. I was a big Gus Malzahn guy. Felt really good about where things were going with KJ Jefferson and him. Swing and a miss. So I could be off here, but I've got to see more. I mean, Scott Frost was 10-26 in the Big Ten. 10-26 in the Big Ten. I don't care if he worked with Sean McVay after that. He was 10-26 in the Big Ten and had 1 year of greatness at this level. That's it. So just not enough there for me to do anything more than that. Lance Leipold had a disappointing year this year. Disappointing year, missed a bowl game at 5-7. What do you do with Lance? I had him in the S tier last year. Is he drop in? Is he going to join Mike Gundy? I'm gonna keep Lance in the A tier. Or the S tier rather. I'm sorry, S tier. Largely because it's hard as hell to win at Kansas, man. The guy still won 9 games there, and by the end of the year this year, I mean, he had a team that was kicking some ass. Did not make it to a bowl game because they didn't give themselves enough room for error, lost too many close games, had issues breaking in a new offensive coordinator, which was my biggest question about him last year. What happens when you hit the stage of having to replace really good coordinators? Happened with Andy Kotelnicki, did not go well. But I think because of where he's at, Kansas, the fact they rallied, he's been recruiting pretty well. They have some momentum on that front. I'm still going S tier until proven otherwise for Lance Leipold. Similar sort of story here with Kyle Whittingham. I don't think you can move him out of the S tier. Such an accomplished career. And, well, yes, you can say, John, you docked Mike Gundy for a 3-win season last year. Yeah, well, Kyle Whittingham won 5 games, and it didn't fall off the rails as much And he has more of an excuse because of all the quarterback injuries that program has dealt with the last 2 years. I mean, a second straight year of just massive QB injury issues. I'm definitely going to cut some slack there to Kyle Whittingham and keep him in the S tier. He's just accomplished too much, guys, throughout his career for me to move him right now. If it's another year like that and we get yet another year away, I don't care what happens at quarterback. Even if Dan Pierre has some injury issues, I'll say, okay, fine. Like, something's clearly not working here. Something's clearly not clicking. This is a big year. I mean, they've got a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback. A lot of change there in a program that's been pretty steady and pretty rock solid. But I just have too much respect for the job that he's done. And it is very plainly obvious to see quarterback injuries have been such a factor. 16 bowls, 20 years, 7 double-digit win seasons, 3 New Year's Six bowls, 2 Pac-12 titles. It's an impressive resume. Willie Fritz. Sorry, Houston fans. Maybe I should have updated the picture here. Had him in the B tier last year. Not going to move him. Only 4-8 in year one, but showed some flashes, man. They upset K-State. They put a real scare into Oklahoma, beat TCU and Utah. And, like, if you would have told me going into the year, Houston in year one, like, Willie Fritz would beat K-State, TCU, and Utah, I'd say it's pretty good. It's a pretty good year. Pretty good year one. No offense at all. They've got to get better. He did lose his defensive coordinator, obviously. Texas Tech money whipped him away. So that's going to be a challenge to replace there. But Fritz is a defensive guy. I think he can figure it out. I think Fritz is another one that you kind of keep in the middle for right now and say, definite room for mobility one way or the other. Going to need to keep making Houston better, but I came in with a high opinion of him. I still have a high opinion of him after seeing what we saw in year one. Scott Satterfield. What are we doing with Scott Satterfield? I had him in the D tier last year. Didn't love what we saw year one at Cincinnati. A little bit better this year. So we're going Scott Satterfield in the C tier. Scott Satterfield, things fell off halfway through last year, and they tanked and did not end up with the season that it looked like it could have been at one point for Cincy. But that was still better. That was still moving in the right direction. I still just don't know, like, how much upside there really is there in the long term. I am still not crazy about that as a hire. Okay, I'm still not crazy about that as a hire for Cincinnati, but I do have to be fair and say it was improved from last year. So I will bump Scott Satterfield up a little bit. I will bump him up. 2 left, and these guys played each other in the bowl game. Let's start with Coach Prime. Coach Prime last year I had in the B tier. He won 9 games this year. He had a Heisman Trophy winner. It's going to move him up, but how far? I'm going to keep him with his buddy Mike Gundy right now in the A tier. Going to do that. Take nothing away from the job he did. It was great. He has improved that program dramatically over 2 years. I just need to see more of a track record here, and especially now, what happens without Shedeur and Travis. But honestly, even more so than Travis, I worry about Shedeur and the impact that will have on the program. Because, you know, Jackson State, he was rolling with Shedeur. Colorado, he's rolling with Shedeur, a guy who's going to be a first-round draft pick at quarterback. He brought in the talent. He gets all the credit in the world for that. He has Caden Slater coming in. He's got Julian Lewis coming in. Clearly, he can still get talent in there. But what happens when it's not the guys that you've been rocking with as you have built this whole thing up? I want to see that before I can declare really S tier here. If he can keep Colorado rolling, another 8 to 9 win season with all of that, I'll shut up and throw him up there in the S tier for sure. I think for right now, had he made the Big 12 championship game, perhaps won the Big 12 championship, definitely could have been in the S tier this year. Didn't quite get there. Love what he did for the league. Love the Heisman Trophy there. Love what he has done in the portal and on the recruiting trail. But for right now, give me another year like that. We can talk about the S tier. And finally, Kalani Sitake. He was in the B tier for me last year when I was kind of waffling like BC. You know, I mean, last year at this time, we were talking about Kalani Sitake's job security. Is he on the hot seat? What do you do with him now? Well, he responds with an 11-win season, goes 10-2 in the regular season, and for me, moves up to the A tier. With that. Another one of those cases where, like, great season, not elite season, winning Big 12, having the same year that Arizona State did, definitely could have moved him up into the S tier. I think move him up into the A tier. Incredible job, man. Again, I felt like I was being generous in putting him in the B tier going into this year. So you can almost say he moved up 2 because I was right on the borderline of giving him C. I am not somebody that dings the accomplishments of the BYU team last year for the fact that they had some close games. But I will say this year, I'm thinking about it like, okay, how much of these close games going to come back around this year? Can you keep that up? Can you continue to win? And when I say close games, like games that you should have won by more. Oklahoma State, Utah, although Utah, I get it's a rivalry game. But can you keep that same thing rolling next year? How much of it was a product of some bounces going your way for that? I won't ding you for that in the moment at all. But I also think when you take a step back and look at, all right, what's it going to mean for next year? There's a reason that Phil Steele will use those close games, how many games you win by 7 points or less, as potential indicators for teams that can go up or down, or turnover luck, how much that can change what's going to happen to a team next year, because that can be something that really tilts your way one year and then tilts the other way another year. Even if you say that tilted BYU's way a little bit last year, it was still a very good season. Even if that were an 8-4 season, still a very good season. And definitely something that would make you feel better about Kalani Sitake. So take nothing away from them there. A tier looks pretty good, man. You're sitting right next to Mike Gundy and Coach Prime. I think that's pretty good. So that's what we got. That's what we got, folks. There's your S tier, your A tier, your B tier, your C tier, and your D tier. Definitely let me know. Definitely let me know what you think. All right, let's do a little bit of feedback here. Cougar Tracks, 11 wins, John. Hey, 11 wins is awesome. Didn't win a conference championship. I mean, Chris Kleiman, I'm trying to see the tiers here. Obviously, Kyle Whittingham has done that a couple times, and I saw some BYU complaints about Kyle Whittingham there. Lance Leipold hasn't, but he won 9 games at Kansas, man. That might as well be 13. Kenny Dillingham won 11 games. Matt Campbell won 11 games. Kleiman's got 10 wins and a Big 12 title in a season. Look, Mike Gundy's got 12 wins, and he's sitting there on the A tier, obviously because of circumstances there. Prime 9. Look at this guy right here, man. Sonny Dykes. Sonny Dykes is sitting on the B tier, and he's got a 12-win season. So we can't just say 11 wins, you're automatically an S-tier coach. A lot of circumstantial things that happen with all this. But let me know what you think in the comments, people. Let me know what you think in the comments. Fill that up, share it. Would love for you guys to do all of that. Welcome back. Here I am. What an experience. What a ride. What a ride. I have this other story. Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do the SEC story. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate all of you for being here. Thanks for hanging out tonight. Going to go a little bit extra long here tonight. And then I've got a newsletter to finish up. So Open for Business is the Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com to get subscribed for that. Would appreciate it if all of you guys did that. Easy way to support the channel, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you want to support the channel that way, and you can leave a question or comment, I will kick off the next show with it if you do that. And check out my merch. Link in the description, my swaggy merch. You can get some John Kurtz or some Open for Business merch by following that link. Okay. The SEC's chirping again. That's the long and short of it here. The SEC's chirping again, and this time it is Shane Beamer who is doing the chirping, the head coach at South Carolina. It's just the same old tired song and dance, to be quite honest. And I understand why Shane Beamer would do this. I will cut him a little bit more slack, but at the same time, I want to go on the opposite side and say you actually should deserve less slack here. So we all remember Lane Kiffin's tweets about the committee. Any one of those games that was starting to get a little bit out of hand in the college football playoff, he was firing off shots about the committee. Even did it after Tennessee had gotten completely bum rushed and bulldozed by Ohio State in the first round of the playoff, obviously being an SEC squad that lost. Even after Arizona State was one play away from the lowly Big 12 of knocking off mighty Texas SEC runner-up in Dallas in a game that was a real home field sort of advantage there. I digress. Lane Kiffin was still at it with the Twitter fingers. And then you add, Nick Saban has still been complaining even all the way back to 2022 about how his team in 22 should have gotten in over TCU because it's just so different playing in the SEC, nobody understands. You've got the Peter Burns of the world who's, like the Baghdad Bob that the SEC rolls out there. And of course, Paul Feinbaum making all the statements that he has, even after being put in his place rightfully by Ari Wasserman, who did an excellent job with that from On 3. We've just heard this over and over again. Of course, you guys live on social media. You see the fans, the hypothetical wins, all of that. It all came in full force during playoff time that we got a barrage of that from the SEC. And then what happened? Well, then the playoff happened. We got through the conclusion of the playoff. The Big Ten won a second straight national championship. The SEC failed to play for a national championship for a second straight year. Things actually got a little bit quieter. Paul Feinbaum finally backed down after Alabama's bowl game performance and said, okay, I'm going to chill on the Alabama thing. Maybe I was a little bit off there. Fair enough, you guys. We even got Paul Feinbaum to back off a little bit. The SEC had to sort of take a back seat once Georgia and Texas both lost, particularly the Georgia loss to Notre Dame, double-digit loss to the Fighting Irish. Things didn't go well for the SEC in the playoff. It proved that this year they were just another conference. And it did not just mean more relative to the rest of the country. But give it some time and space, and you know what? Those voices come right back. And this should not have surprised anybody. That all you had to do was just wait for it to die down a little bit, and then it would come right back. Now we have Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer says, get ready for it, guys. The SEC is, quote, just different. Just different. The SEC is just different. We just wouldn't understand. The SEC is just different. Quote, the fact of the matter is we beat the ACC champion on their field this year and didn't get in. I understand why we didn't get in and why Clemson did. I'm not sour about that, but I do believe this league is just different than others, and there has to be some consideration. That seems like a very contradictory statement from Shane Beamer there. I understand why we didn't get in and why Clemson did, but I do believe this league is just different than others. Well, it wasn't this year, Shane, and all the data supports and backs that up. It is an objectively true statement to say that the league was not, in fact, any different at all from others this year, and that is what you were talking about is what happened this year. You should not, South Carolina 2025, get the benefit of the doubt because of what Nick Saban did in, let's say 2010 to 2020. You don't get that benefit of the doubt extended that way because that's not what the reality of the league was this year. You got to earn it on a year-by-year basis, and I would think people in the South would be very much pull yourself up by your bootstraps and earn it. I think that's kind of the way of life down there, right? And that's how you guys roll, man. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go earn it. You don't need any welfare playoff spots. The SEC doesn't need any welfare playoff spots. Shane, come on now. You can go earn it. You can go earn it. Here's the rest of his quote. Look, I've got great respect for other conferences. I've been to other conferences. I've been a part of the ACC. I've been a part of the Big 12. There's no question that there's good football everywhere. But when you just talk about the teams in the league and the teams you play week in and week out, here's that quote, guys. It's different. It's different. This is where I guess Lane Kiffin will tell us about the rigors of going and playing at Kroger Stadium, whatever the hell it is, in Lexington, Kentucky. We're gonna hear all about that. It's like, man, can you guys at least like have a PR meeting and like spruce this up a little bit and not just give us the same recycled line over and over again? Like, it's different. It's different. Look, I like Shane Beamer. I think he's a likable coach, and I understand some of why he would complain and be frustrated and upset here, because his team did get screwed by the officiating crew in that LSU game. They should have won that game. But then get mad at that. Be mad at the officials. If you want to jump in and say, hey, we need some reform on officiating, join in on the Josh Pate crusade on that, on like, hey, we need to, pay the guys better, have a better oversight, like more organized. Do that thing. That's who your issues with. It was a conference game that killed you there, and a bad call against LSU. It's not anything about the ACC or the Big 12 who you single out here. That's the frustration for this one with me, plus just this general idea from SEC country that they just deserve to be handed something, which again, hilarious because it is so contradictory toward the way that they live their lives down in the South, and everybody wants to think and act about things down in the South. You got to earn everything. You got to earn everything. And instead they're wanting to collect a college football playoff golden ticket, like a food stamp or something. I fail to see. There's a little bit of cognitive dissonance there in SEC country. And then you press them on some actual evidence, and it's just different. You wouldn't understand, man. It's just different. It's just different. Okay. Well, thank you, Shane, for being the latest in that parade to give us that valuable information about what it is like to play in the SEC. All right. One final reminder: you can get merch in the link in the description from My Swaggy Merch. Appreciate them. ofbnews.com, or click the link in the description of the video to get the Big 12 newsletter open for business, totally free, cutting through SEC and Big 10 noise to get you the news that matters for the Big 12. ofbnews.com, join 3,400 plus other Big 12 subscribers who are also reading the newsletter. John Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you have a question or comment that you want me to lead off the next show with, you can show your support there. Appreciate all the guys who do that. And I think that's it. I will plan on, I believe, doing a show on Wednesday. We'll see. It's a little bit slower this time of year. So if we have much more to chew on, I certainly will hop in, but we'll see. Might have to be a bit more flexible with me here in kind of the off-season-ish portion of things. But if you want to stay up to date on Big 12 basketball, man, I'm definitely engrossed in that right now. ofbnews.com is the way to do that. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I appreciate you all. Like the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel. Spread the word. Take care, and I will talk to you all very soon.